Jay, I'm Jad Abumrad. This is More Perfect, a mini-series about the Supreme Court. We live in a democracy with three branches in it. You got the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. Now, that third branch, the judicial, the courts, consists of about 100-ish federal courts, and on top of those courts is the court. This temple of 9, now 8, unelected lifetime appointees who seem to have this tremendous power.
Almost tyrannical power.
They are wickedly important, and we're reminded of this.
Scalia's death throws a huge unknown factor into this campaign.
Every time we turn on the TV.
We are one justice away from losing our fundamental rights in this country.
Because here we are in an election, and the phrase that you hear a lot.
One of the most important things in that election, I think.
This might be the most important thing to those of you who are young outside of that.
Is it one of the most important things the next president's going to do?
This next president may very well appoint
between 1 and 3
4 Supreme Court justices.
Now, never mind that most Americans have no idea who the justices are. 2/3 can't even name a single justice.
I can't even name the one that just died.
I honestly couldn't tell you any of their names.
I can't
I don't know any.
I don't either.
The only name of a judge I know is Judge Judy.
Doesn't matter. We all know that whoever they are, they're incredibly powerful people. That they can, boom, instantly strike down a law that took years to pass.
The Supreme Court reversed a century of law that I believe will open the floodgates.
They can undo executive orders. They can even change, like, these long-held definitions, like what makes a person, what makes a marriage. They can even decide an election.
Justice Scalia?
My usual response is get over it.
Get over the possible corrupting of the American presidential system.
Now, with all the background chatter in the election, it's sort of interesting to think about the fact that when it comes to the court and their power, it didn't have to be this way. It didn't have to be this way.
And it wasn't for a long time.
And it wasn't for a long time.
Yeah.
Reporter Kelsey Padgett will take it from here.
I mean, if you go back in time, say like early 1800s, the court had so little power. In fact, they were
Meeting in the basement of Congress.
That's Linda Monk, constitutional scholar.
One newspaper refers to it later as a dark, dank potato hole.
A potato hole. Like it was damp or something?
I mean, D.C. at this time was like a swamp. So I imagine there were spiders in there, and they said there weren't very many windows.
Well,
maybe it wasn't that bad, but still.
We think of 3 separate branches. It's kind of hard to think of yourself as a separate branch when you're meeting in the basement of Congress.
Not only that.
When Congress actually sets up the first Supreme Court, they created originally a Supreme Court of 6 justices.
That's Yale law professor Akil Reed Amar.
An even number. How odd. Today, we're freaked out. Oh, the court could be divided 4-4. What's going to happen? Oh, my God.
It could be a 4-4 split. What happens then?
The Supreme Court is not designed to function with an even number of justices.
You know, we're in a crisis.
So should cable news be creating their constitutional crisis graphics?
But originally, the first Congress, they created 6 members because they're not imagining the court as deciding everything.
In other words, like, you know, if the court split, who cares? Because at the time, they weren't deciding big cases. They weren't deciding, like, affirmative action, Roe v. Wade, nothing like that. They were handling, like, these little tiny rinky-dink cases. And most of their time was spent literally riding in carriages from town to town.
Trying cases around the country, and that's a big hassle. They don't even get to sleep in their own beds.
Wait, why are they riding around?
Well, so they actually each had a separate geographical zone that they're in charge of, and that's actually still true today. But unlike today, where people, you know, come to the Supreme Court, back then...
People weren't coming to them. Why would I do that?
That's Ellie Mistal, our legal editor.
Why would I go seek out these guys someplace else to hear my local issue in South Carolina? If they have something to say about it, they can come to South Carolina, sit on my farm, and talk to me. Got to think about the country in 1800 and 1804. This is a states' rights, states-centric country.
All of which is to say that being a Supreme Court justice at the time...
It's not a great gig.
It's rough. Consequently, the people who chose to do this, well... they're kind of misfits.
Yeah, totally. And who are, like, really smart, but, like, a motley crew that isn't organized.
That's Ari Savitsky. He's a lawyer, constitutional history enthusiast. He says at the time on the court, you had this one guy nicknamed Old Bacon Face.
Who is like a maniac. He's like the kind of like Charlie Sheen, Wild Thing in Major League type character.
Very hot-tempered, had a foul mouth.
There's another one who, is like 4'5" and like really silent. The Supreme Court was like a pretty ragtag bunch.
All of this happens in part because the Constitution is embarrassingly silent on what the Supreme Court is, what it should do, how it should be constituted. Article 3 of our United States Constitution says, there shall be a Supreme Court. Thanks, guys.
It's true. I mean, it's kind of weird. Like, if you read the Constitution...
Boy, it spends a lot of time talking about the House of Representatives. How are you going to count slaves? And it's going to be by population. There has to be a census every 10 years because the House is important.
But when it comes to the Supreme Court, all you get is like a couple of sentences.
Almost nothing at all.
And that's kind of the puzzle of this. Like, how did they get so powerful? I mean, they started out as these, like, nobodies in a basement, and now they're these all-powerful, priests of the Constitution.
The Supreme Court of the United States. 9 men
and women,
high in government, who sit in judgment on many of the great questions before our nation.
So how did that happen? Especially when there's, like, arguably nothing in the Constitution that said that should happen.
All right, so how did it happen?
Well, you could trace so much of this back to one move by one man.
John Marshall.
John Marshall.
John Marshall.
The new Chief Justice.
He arrives to the court in 1801.
Marshall, calls his first meeting of the court. And one person shows up.
What do you mean the other?
They got something better to do. They just don't show up.
Actually, it was 3, but still.
Wait, before we go too deep, can you just, what did he look like?
Oh, they all look the same to me.
He didn't mean that.
He was tall. Okay. He was gaunt.
He had a square jaw.
Very jowly.
Piercing eyes.
Marshall was a smart cookie.
And he would need to be, because he ends up getting in this very famous fight with his very famous second cousin that would change the course of the American history, forever.
Who's his very famous second cousin?
Well, just a little old man named Thomas Jefferson.
Oh, TJ.
Now, John Marshall and Thomas Jefferson really don't like each other. Phew. I mean, on a personal level, you think Hamilton and Jefferson is something on Broadway. Actually, it was Marshall and Jefferson who really despised each other. And yet they both come from Virginia. They both come from the back country.
Why all the hate?
Well, I mean, part of it was this, family beef. At one point, John Marshall's wife's mother rejected Thomas Jefferson romantically.
What?
Yeah.
Wait, his wife's mother?
Yeah, so his mother-in-law
said no to the great Thomas Jefferson.
I know.
But that doesn't seem like enough of a reason.
Well, I mean, okay, so the main reason, the non-gossipy reason, the non-fun reason, is because they were in opposite political parties.
I think an important thing to understand about Marshall is that he's a party man. Okay?
He's a party man.
He's a party man.
He likes to party.
He's committed to his team, and his team are the Federalists.
The Federalists, they love big government.
Let's have a national bank, rev up national power.
The Republicans, Thomas Jefferson's people, they like small, tiny government. Let the states have the power.
We're maybe even in favor of the view that states can veto a federal law if they don't like it.
So these two guys, these two cousins, both national figures, totally different philosophies, and even before Marshall hits the court, they're going.
They beef and they beef and they beef.
It's actually a slugfest.
To paraphrase, Marshall, you're dishonest. Jefferson, you're a hack. Marshall, you and your friends are poisoning America.
It's a food fight.
It's very difficult to stop the tendency to view the people that you disagree with as evil.
We need somebody that can take our jobs back, Frank, because we're going to hell.
It's really hard. We do that today all the time, right? They, even as much, if not more than today, they thought that the other side was trying to destroy the America that they had just created. Anyway, throughout the 1790s, the Federalists are in power. The Federalists hold all the, branches of government.
John Adams is president, mostly loved by his own party, hated by Thomas Jefferson's party.
They literally call him, his rotundity. Very offensive.
So Adams is in power, and ultimately our guy, John Marshall?
Marshall is Secretary of State, one of the highest officials in the Adams administration.
Party man.
And for a while, things are going well for his party. But then, in 1800, Thomas Jefferson and the Republicans sweep in and absolutely crush the Federalists.
Like landslide crush?
Yeah. Fleetwood Mac style.
The Republicans ran the table in 1800. They're going to take over the House. They're going to take over the presidency.
So John Adams is like, crap, what do I do?
We need to save the Republic.
The Federalists have basically been swept out.
But in his dire moment, he has this idea. He's thinking like, ugh, I've lost the House. I've lost the White House. Oh, the Supreme Court. And normally nobody cares about the Supreme Court. But like in this moment, he's thinking, oh my gosh, this is my last hope.
And in fact,
as luck would have it, a vacancy pops up.
A vacant Chief Justice position. So just as Justice Scalia has recently died and there's a vacancy, well, the sitting Chief Justice, Oliver Ellsworth, steps down, and Adams picks his Secretary of State, John Marshall, to be the new Chief Justice.
Ta-da!
That's how we got John Marshall.
And John Adams does one other thing.
In the waning seconds of his presidency,
Adams and these repudiated Federalists jam through a whole bunch of federal judgeships.
They create scores of new judges.
And they throw Federalists into almost all of those positions.
It's like 40 appointments.
He just throws in 40 judges right at the last minute?
Congress creates 40 judges at the last minute, and then he appoints 40 judges at the last minute.
If I were Jefferson, I would be pissed.
Jefferson is pissed.
Which we'll get to in a second. But in the meantime, Adams has just a few days left in his presidency, so he's like frantically trying to get all these judges in.
Nominate these people, confirm them. Once you confirm someone, you have to like give them their commission. You can't just go around claiming you're a judge or claiming you're whatever. You have to have a commission, like a piece of paper with the formal seal and the signature of the president.
And
as the story goes,
as the clock is striking midnight on John Adams's last day,
Adams and his team, they're in his office, and they're trying to get these papers out the door. They're frantically signing them and stamping them.
I just imagine like young boys sprinting through the dead of night with these waving these papers over their head.
No commission! No commission! In fact, the I think totally apocryphal story is that Jefferson's attorney general like busts in the door at midnight and he's like, put down your pen, you know? Don't do it. So, but apparently some of the commissions don't get delivered. They just are left sitting on the desk because was
it like an oversight or something or clerical error?
It's not even like they just ran out of time.
Wow.
But they thought like if a couple are left on the desk, it's no big deal.
Because like it's a signed commission from the president. It's like still a binding document. The fact that it wasn't formally delivered, you know, you still get your appointment.
So this sets up this like kind of terrible situation for Jefferson. He shows up the next day to take power.
And the judiciary is filled with ghosts of presidential appointees past.
Just a bastion of partisan judges.
So,
as you can imagine,
Jefferson and his friends think that this is not fair.
Jefferson sees Marshall and all of the other judges that Adams appointed as Adams's spies on his administration.
So Jefferson, he decides to immediately retaliate because, you know, he won the presidency. He won by a lot. And he's like, you're shoving all these judges down my throat? And on top of that, the guy you've named to be the head of the judges, the head of the Supreme Court, is my evil second cousin? What is this?
So Jefferson is running the country and working with the Republican Congress to, among other things, cancel the Supreme Court term for 1802.
They just canceled the whole term?
They just canceled it. They were
what
like,
did they say? Like, go home?
Yeah, they were like, there's no more Supreme Court, sorry.
Imagine if that happened today. When Obama's plan for immigration got smacked down, imagine him, like, instead of having, like, that peaceful press conference where he, like, shows his disappointment, imagine instead he was like, Supreme Court?
Go to your room.
No good punks. That's right.
Anyhow, Marshall is sent away for over a year. There's no full Supreme Court meetings. And when he comes back, it's pretty clear to him that the Supreme Court, it's on life support. That the Republicans could pull the plug at any minute.
Marshall knows already that there are rumblings that one of his colleagues, a man named Chase,
Old Bacon Face, you know, that guy,
should be impeached.
So when he sees this
motley crew
in a dark, dank potato hole,
he's like, I gotta do something. We're fighting for our life here.
I was thinking about this on the way over, and it kind of reminds me of, you know, those like summer camp movies where there's like a baseball team and they're like super ragtag and like can't get together. And then like at the end they have to like play the really good team with like the nice professional uniforms. That's kind of like the judges on the Supreme Court. And Marshall was kind of like the counselor, the camper, you know, the new kid on the block who comes to the team and is like, we can do this, guys. We can do it.
Cue 80s movie training montage. He knows that if the U.S. is even going to have a court system with the Supreme Court, he's got to beef this team up.
One of the first things that Marshall does is just professionalize the judiciary.
Like, so for example, he starts this tradition of wearing black robes.
That made them look the part.
The judges appeared in their robes of justice.
He figured that the black robes would make them look less like partisan hacks and more like they're floating above the fray, beyond politics. Next, he moves all the justices into this one dorm.
The same rooming house.
No wives, no family, all business.
He's trying to create that more perfect union in the judiciary.
And just to grease the wheels a little bit,
have some Madeira, my dear.
Is that some wine?
Yes, it's a fortified wine.
Funky cold Madeira.
Justice Marshall would order it in great quantities. That, many scholars think, was part of John Marshall's secret.
Okay, so he's professionalizing the team, he's getting them together, and then they get put to the test. In 1803. It's a cousin-on-cousin smackdown. Okay, so remember how R.A. told us that some of those commissions didn't get delivered?
Yeah.
I think 5.
And that they were just like sitting on a desk somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
And how they thought it wasn't a big deal?
Because it's still a binding document.
Well, when Jefferson comes to power, apparently he finds those papers and is like, oh, look at this. You didn't deliver these commissions. Guess you can't get those positions. Sorry.
And one of the people that lost out because their commission did not get delivered was one Mr. William Marbury.
He was a businessman, 39 years of age.
He got appointed to be Justice of the Peace. It's a pretty low-ranking position.
So he's sitting there, he's waiting for his commission to show up, and, like, of course it never does. And it finally dawns on him, like, oh, the Jefferson administration has it. I'm gonna go get it.
He files a lawsuit. So, and what he does is actually, it ends up being really important, but he files a lawsuit directly in the Supreme Court.
Wait, you can do that? You can just go right to the Supreme Court? Like first?
Well, at this time, Congress had just passed a law that said, like, in certain very strange circumstances, you can just go directly to the Supreme Court.
He goes directly to the Supreme Court and he says, I have a right. I have a legal right.
I want you, the Supreme Court, to order
Thomas Jefferson, give me that darn piece of paper that says I'm really a judge.
The case gets named Marbury v. Madison because James Madison is Jefferson's Secretary of State, who he's actually suing, but
he's essentially suing the president,
forcing Marshall in the court to have this confrontation with Jefferson. So now it's the showdown. It's between Marshall's ragtag team and Jefferson.
So basically what happens is the court has a trial.
Marbury and his lawyers, they get up there and they're like, what happened to the papers?
Where is the commission? Did you have them? What'd you do with them?
Jefferson's people get up there and say, I don't know what you're talking about.
I won't answer the question of what happened to them. They stonewall.
To which Marbury's lawyers are like, seriously?
These are all, like, important official documents signed by the president. Like, no one knows what happened to them. Like, it's like...
They go back and forth.
Back and forth.
Things get very tense.
And, you know, I mean, to their credit, like, no one, like, gets punched out.
Eventually, they stop arguing about whether or not the papers exist. And they're like, this is the more important question. Does the Jefferson administration have to honor those papers? Do they have to give the commission to Marbury?
Are they required? Is there a legal requirement that they give it to him?
And in Marshall's head, it's a resounding...
Hell yeah. He should have gotten that commission.
Because the law is the law. And if you decide you're not going to follow the law just because you don't like the guy who made the law, or you don't think it's fair, that's anarchy.
I mean, we talk a lot in this country. We pat ourselves on the back in this country about our peaceful transfer of power.
Ellie Mistal again.
About how we seamlessly can go from one party to the other party without bloodshed in the streets and whatever. Yeah, good for us. But how did we actually get to that point? And this is a key reason why we've gotten to that point, because the decisions of the past administration still hold value even when that administration is kicked out of office, kind of overthrown by popular vote. Their decisions still have sway, still have legal force. Jefferson was quite obviously negating that.
So Marshall wants to say to Jefferson, suck it up, cousin. Give this guy his papers.
You're an official. Do your job.
But he thinks twice.
He understands how weak his court is.
According to Akil Amar, Marshall's afraid that if he orders Jefferson to give over those papers, Jefferson is going to straight up
laugh in his face and say, "You and what army? I'm not going to do it."
Literally, they just got back from a congressionally mandated you can't come to work time.
Jefferson knows full well that he has no intention of granting that commission. He will never give that commission. Jefferson knows this. Marshall knows this. Marshall knows that if he tells Jefferson to give him the commission, Jefferson is going to ignore him, and then the power of the Supreme Court basically evaporates.
Because Ellie says, if you think about it,
if the executive branch is going to say kind of right at the jump that if you make a decision that I don't like, I'm just going to ignore that, then every executive branch going on from Jefferson throughout the rest of our history is going to just ignore the Supreme Court when the Supreme Court does something that the executive doesn't like.
So basically, Marshall's kind of stuck. If he rules for Jefferson, he's selling out the law and he's going to make the court look weak. If he rules against Jefferson, Jefferson's going to ignore the court and they're going to look weak. Either way,
Jefferson wins.
And either way, the Supreme Court maybe disappears forever.
Marshall needed to find a way to get through this.
He needed to find some way to kick this case.
To be clear, John Marshall is running away from a fight with Thomas Jefferson. He says all sorts of things, but he knows that Thomas Jefferson, straight up has more power, and so he's retreating.
Wow, this suddenly feels like an apocalyptical moment.
Yeah.
What does he do?
Well, so the thing that he does, it's like the most Jedi Masterish thing ever. He writes this 100-something page decision, and in the beginning...
If you actually read the decision, it's a lot of pages of telling Jefferson how he's wrong, how he can't do what he did, how he is, ruining America. Right? There's a lot of that in the Marshall decision.
But then, when he gets to the matter at hand, he does this little shift. So he says, okay, hold up.
Yes.
Marbury is right.
He should have gotten that commission.
And
yes,
Mr. Jefferson should not be doing this.
But
we, the Supreme Court,
we don't have jurisdiction to hear this case. Court needs to have the power to hear a case. And if a court doesn't have the power to hear a case, even if you are completely right, even if your position is right, you can't get relief.
Wait, why would he say that they don't have jurisdiction?
So this is where he uses the force. Earlier I had mentioned that Marbury brought this case under a law Congress had passed that said Marbury could come straight to the Supreme Court, for this kind of situation. Well, John Marshall, he goes back to his Constitution. He's reading around. He's trying to figure out what he can do here. And he finds this little sentence.
Yeah, so it's Article 3, Section 2.
In the Constitution. Basically, you're not supposed to go to the Supreme Court first. You're supposed to go to a different court, and then the Supreme Court. It's an appeals court.
Wonky!
Exactly. But he basically tells Marbury, the plaintiff.
You came in, and you came to the Supreme Court first. And you did that because Congress passed a law that said that you could come to the Supreme Court first. But the Constitution says that you can't come to the Supreme Court first.
So I can't help you.
Nope.
It's not your fault, Mr. Marbury.
But that law was unconstitutional.
And we're not going to follow that unconstitutional directive.
So you see what he did there?
Maybe I see. I don't know if I see.
Well, okay, so you know that part in Star Wars?
Was a weak old man.
The first one, where Obi-Wan Kenobi is fighting with Darth Vader, and he says,
"If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine."
This is like that, but real. Marshall is agreeing to lose. He's found this way to lose. To let Darth Vader strike him down. And that's actually going to make him more powerful. He's basically saying to his cousin, okay, you don't have to give Marbury his commission. And And the reason you don't have to give Marbury his commission is because that law doesn't work. Because we, the court, we get to decide when something agrees with or doesn't agree with the Constitution. So, like, congrats. You win, cousin.
Oh, and by the way, we, the court, have the power to declare things unconstitutional.
That was the sort of Jedi master move.
That's the move.
Instead of jumping off the cliff or laying down, he jukes to the right, and he establishes a new rule of the game. Unconstitutional.